Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Slate live chat about all kinds of stuff. We were going to talk about Georgia, but I think we'll also have to talk about the siege on the Capitol, which, is top of the news and top of mind for many of us. We'll see how the night goes. I'm Christina Cauterucci, a staff writer at Slate and host of the Slate podcast Outward. And I am joined tonight by two of my most esteemed colleagues who I'll allow to introduce themselves. Joel?
I'm not so esteemed, but I'm Joel Anderson, writer, podcast host here, usually hang up and listen, but also did Slow Burn 3. And I guess my qualification for being here is that I've written about Georgia and lived there for 2 years. Maybe that's it. So,
that counts.
And I'm a Gemini. So that's part of the intro. So.
Yeah, we wanted to keep things spicy.
That's right. No, I'm happy to be here, especially talk to y'all. I know you wrote your piece on DC and Jim, who was right in the center of the craziness, but he can say that for himself, obviously. So,
I'm Jim Newell. I'm a senior politics writer for Slate. I haven't lived in Georgia at all before, but I did spend one night there recently, and I think this is like pathetic to say, but this may have been the first time I actually stayed a night there, like outside of going through like O'Hare and stuff. I like realized that when I was there.
O'Hare?
So what I'm trying to say is I'm extremely well qualified to talk about Georgia and Georgia geography and culture and everything like that.
Which city were you in? Which city were you in when you were in Georgia?
Savannah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've never been there.
We were down in Florida, and we drove back up from Florida, so we made a couple quick stops.
Okay.
Well, I'd love to hear all about that trip, maybe on another Slate live chat. For this one, Jim, I know you were at the Capitol yesterday when Trump supporters attacked Congress. We're so glad you're okay. Before we get deeper into that, if you're watching, we may be answering questions if we get to them throughout the show. So if you have a question that you'd like us to discuss, put it in the comments. We'll try to get to it. So Jim, we were supposed to do this event yesterday night, but earlier in the week, you said, Wednesday could get kind of crazy with the election results certification. Let's be safe and push the event to Thursday. To me, it seems like you were more prepared for the insurrection than the Capitol Police were. So what I'd like to know is, what did you know and when did you know it?
So I was not prepared for the armed insurrection. When I said crazy, I meant in terms of like, there could be procedural maneuvers like throughout the night on Wednesday, that's what I'll be covering. So I did not. I mean, there were certainly warnings that things could get out of hands, but I did not expect them to take the Capitol building, as apparently the Capitol Police did not expect that either. So yeah, I went up there. Yeah, I went up there ahead of the joint session to count the Electoral College, which started at 1, and then I was in the House chamber for the beginning of that. Then they get to Arizona's turn, and there's the objection, so they go to break into separate debate sessions, the House and the Senate. And so I left the House chamber after that. And then I was going to go over to the Senate to watch that debate. And I was like looking out the windows, and I was like trying to see if everyone was, behind the barricades and everything. And they were, but then I went somewhere else and I came back and I looked, I was like, they're past the barricades now. I should probably, and then a cop was saying like, we're going into lockdown. So I was walking back to my press gallery, and I looked down from the third floor to the second, where there are these central doors. And you can hear it like, Game of Thrones or something, where they're like manning the gate, but you can hear them like thumping on the outside or whatever. And then I'm looking, and someone, I don't know what tool he had brought, but he was trying to smash open one of the double pane windows on that center front door. So that I tweeted a video of that, and it went really widespread. So I've had a lot of people being like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you fine?" And I mean, I didn't tell them. Like, as soon as I saw that, like, I got the hell out of there. I went to the my press gallery. We locked ourselves in there, and there was like 8 of us reporters, and you could hear people running through the halls, and like they bang on the doors. You could smell like traces of gas. I mean, the thing I was most nervous about was just that the press gallery, has a big sign on the door that says "press."
Oh
and
my
I
God.
thought maybe that'd be a target for some of these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, after a couple hours there, we had police come in and escort us out into one of the office buildings, and then they swept it up pretty well. So yeah, I wasn't like, deep in the shit like our colleague Eamon was, reporting on everyone. But it was nervy. I didn't know, I had no idea when I would get out of that building or how long it'd take to sweep up.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being as scared as possible, like how scared were you at the worst of it?
Joel, never scared at all for even a second. No, I mean, I was.
All right, okay, let's hold you here. I got you.
No, there was like a couple moments when you hear them banging on the door that is marked press, and you read like some of these other tweets about like gunshots elsewhere. That was a little nervous, and that's when you start looking around the room at like, all right, I can grab that fire extinguisher. We could spray them with that or something while we try to like sneak out another way or something. But it was just like it was like 1 hour there with. It was like an hour there where they really weren't contained, and we just had a locked door that they could have broken down if they wanted to. But once we got out of that room, then everything was fine.
Well, I'm glad you did make it out okay, obviously. It was, I mean, I live a couple miles from the Capitol. It was very weird to be able to see the Capitol from my window, be watching the coup take place on the news and on Twitter, and still feel like safely locked up in my house, like I could have been anywhere. I feel like, especially because of the pandemic, watching a lot of the things that have gone down over the past couple months, as Trump has gotten increasingly dangerous, as the election went down, as Trump got COVID, it's felt really surreal to me because I'm so isolated from so many people. It just feels like this powder keg that could go off at any minute. And, now we still have a couple more weeks before he presumably leaves office. But Jim, I know you wrote a piece about how Democrats are responding, and what options there may be to try to get him out sooner than that. What do you think the chances are that that Congress is able to successfully remove him?
I think it's pretty slim. I think using the 25th Amendment to try and transfer power to the vice president, which they can do if the vice president and the cabinet vote to do that. They can do that, and it would transfer power from Trump immediately. But then Trump has an opportunity to contest it, and after a couple of days, Congress could vote and restore Trump. And Pence has said he's not going to go down that path already. So then the other option is impeachment, which we're all familiar with, and and they can get a quick impeachment out of the House. And I mean, at this point, I'm betting that they do go down that path in the next few days if they really wanted to. But then, it's going to hit the Senate, and they're out of session. Do they even come back to take it up? Do they, does the president need time to mount a defense? And so it just gets delayed for a while, and then you're at the end of the 13 days anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not to say that impeaching him would be like a bad idea. You could still like put it on the historical record about what this guy did, that it was an impeachable offense. And maybe, he just released a video tonight where, it was good Trump. He was like, oh, we're going to have a peaceful transfer of power now. And it was a hard fought election. And it's like, obviously he's going to say something different in the morning, but maybe he got a little bit spooked by Congress talking about getting him out of there.
Yeah, and if they do impeach him and convict him after he leaves office, I mean, is that possible? Is that what would bar him from holding office again?
I have not thought about that question. If they could continue the trial I probably should have thought about this quick. If they could continue the trial after he's already out of office. I mean, maybe. I don't think they would convict him anyway because I don't think he'll get enough Republicans.
Yeah.
I imagine they call it moot or bring it to an abrupt end and vote.
Yeah. Joel, I know you were tweeting earlier today about this idea that some people have that these extremists who attacked the Capitol building were, stupid, that they've been lied to, they've been duped, their heads are full of worms that were implanted there by Fox News and Newsmax and Facebook conspiracies. Why does that narrative ring false to you?
Well, I mean, so yeah, I don't want to point out anybody in particular, but I did see like several people, high-profile pundits, columnists, whatever, making the argument that the people that showed up as part of that mob yesterday, that they've been lied to and misled, and like you said, they're brain poisoned or whatever, and that they, that the people that really need to apologize are the people in charge, people in Congress, people like Josh Hawley, President Trump, whoever on down, right? They should. I mean, they should feel some shame for their role in ginning up that sort of anger. But it's not like that anger has ever needed any one of the people that are present today to show up in the past. Like, by which I mean, God, I hate to be a person that says, as I said in my tweet earlier today, but
that's exactly what I'm asking you to do.
It's so annoying. But, I just think about, my parents were born in the Jim Crow South. And so, my grandparents lived their whole life in the Jim Crow South. They didn't need they didn't need Fox News to people back then. They didn't need anybody or anything in particular to know that, like, that Black people's role in the electoral process in this country was conditional, and that they shouldn't even have a role in the electoral process. And so then, you go from that. That's a few years before I'm even born, like the Jim Crow holds up in the country. And then you move to, I just remember as a teenager, like not long after Bill Clinton was elected, there was this, rising tide of the angry white male. Like that was like a phenomenon that was going on, and there were, columns and everything written about it. And in fact, Newsweek magazine did a cover in March of 1993. So this is just, a couple months after Bill Clinton has been inaugurated for his first term. And it was the title of that story was White Male Paranoia. And I just want to real quickly read this line because it's going to sound so familiar to everything we've ever heard in this life. But there's these lines in the story that go as follows. This is a weird moment to be a white man. True, one of them just became president, but one of them always becomes president. And this one has just finished appointing the most non-white, non-male cabinet in American history. A Black female poet read at his inauguration, welcoming everybody to the party. The Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African, the Native American, the Sioux, the Ashanti, the Yoruba, the Crew, and dropping in the occasional Swede and Scot almost as if they were tokens. WASP didn't even rate a mention. Some party. Suddenly, white American males are surrounded by feminists, multiculturalists, PC police persons, affirmative action employers, rap artists, Native Americans, Japanese tycoons, Islamic fundamentalists, and third world dictators. All of them saying the same thing. You've been a bad boy. This is 1993, okay? Like when white people, white men are mad then. I'm 15 years old then. And then, you flash forward to the roots of the Tea Party. The same sort of thing, people storming into the streets and being mad about, the diminishing role and influence in American politics. And here we are again in 2020. And so, 2021. And so the idea that anybody in particular needed to stoke the embers of white male anger just rings false to me. It's always there. It's always it always has a presence in our American politics, whether or not we want to admit it. And although yesterday was shocking, it wasn't surprising because of that. That at some point somebody would figure out, oh, maybe it's politically advantageous to like get white people mad again and stoke their anger for their own political ends.
Well, it's a little bit like. Go ahead, Christina.
Go ahead, Jim. I think it also ignores the fact that Donald Trump and Fox News were created and succeeded for a reason. It's not like a top down, like someone with authority telling other people what to do. Although Donald Trump did incite that mob. But the reason why Fox News and Donald Trump were successful is because people want that kind of message in their lives, and that kind of message speaks to them. And Donald Trump succeeded because people were mad. Donald Trump was mad that Obama, a black man, was president for 8 years. So it's like, it's a cycle. It's not because one thing happened, a bunch of other things happened. These people don't just come to power in a vacuum. People vote for them.
Right. They like what those people are saying and the policies that they tout. I hate to be a cultural critic, but watch the Reagan's documentary that just ran on Showtime, and see what people liked about them and the people that supported them. You know what I mean? So yeah, I totally get it. There's a need for it. It's already out there, and if somebody can sort of harness that power, they can do it like they did yesterday, and you can convince people to storm the Capitol and then not take credit for it afterward.
Yeah, I think I am pissed at everyone for spreading all this brain poisoning stuff about fraud, but it does seem circumstantial. Proud Boys weren't going into the Capitol because of a video of a voting machine in Atlanta or whatever. There was just an excuse. Yeah. It was just, they know what they're going to do, and they just need certain words to fill in to justify, going in and being violent, because you're affiliated with whatever this idea is that pushed Donald Trump to the top. This sort of white supremacist ideas, and now there's going to be a changing of the guard. So yeah, I think a lot of it with the people yesterday is looking to pick a fight and just needing some sort of script. But I am really pissed. There are just, even to people who aren't going to be violent, I think there's still tens of millions of people who just, get an email about, oh, look at the ballot counting machine in Georgia. And even if they're not going to get violent about it, they're just going to believe it. And I think it's a real problem. I don't know what to do about it.
Well, can I ask you all a question for a second? Do you all believe that people really believe that the election was stolen from Trump? I don't think people actually believe that. They just don't think certain votes should count, right? You know what I mean? I think that stolen does a lot of work for Trump here. That it covers up the assumption that people in Detroit and Philadelphia are voting. People in Atlanta are voting. They shouldn't be. You know what I'm saying? So when they go up there and say, "Oh, it was stolen from us," I think that they don't. I don't think they mean it literally, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I don't think Trump, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz actually believe that there was widespread fraud that caused Donald Trump to lose the election. I do believe that there are some people who actually believe that, but I think it's only possible for them to believe that because they have a vision of America in which Black people don't get to pick the president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there are a lot of different strands, because they were just kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what stuck about how it could have been stolen. There were some of these, they tried to do a high mind legal reason, the Constitution isn't clear on what state Supreme Courts can, ask the state legislature to do or whatever, stuff like that. But then there's a straight up stuff where there are people who think, all the rural vote comes in nice and early, and then Detroit watches to see how many votes they need to put over the top, and then they do that. And then there's this idea that you can say something like Republican officials did in Michigan, I won't certify Detroit's vote, but I'll certify the rest of Wayne County's vote, which that's not hard to figure out what they're talking about there, So yeah, there is always this idea, and it may go in different directions. But yeah, that the votes by Black people, one, they need closer examination, and that goes back then further decades to being should this be happening at all,
Mm-hmm. And aren't these people probably cheating as they're signing people up to vote?
Right, and these ideas about
We
like
have
urban
a couple-
machines and like, yeah.
Yeah, we have some questions from audience members. Jim, the first one I'm going to expect you to answer. When will the new Georgia senators be inaugurated, and could that impact impeachment?
I don't think so because they're still counting ballots right now. I think they're like, they're at 99.8% or whatever, but then they have to complete that and they have to canvass and certify. So I guess as soon as they certify, then within a couple of days they could swear them in. But that could be a couple of weeks, so it could be really right on the borderline.
And I'm sure it's in their interest to drag it out as long as possible.
Yeah, it'll be in their interest. And, I think once Joe Biden takes over, and if Chuck Schumer takes over right around then, he's not going to actually want to spend any time on an impeachment trial anymore. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff they need to get done. So, I bet.
I don't know. I feel like there are few things that are more important right now than sending a clear and present signal that this was not okay and that no president should be able to get away with this again. I don't know what Chuck Schumer thinks, but I know there are a lot of policy priorities that I'm excited to see them try to achieve, but I don't think we can just move past from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can expedite. They would try to do some sort of expedited vote so you get it on the record, but 2 weeks of floor time or whatever on a trial when you have to confirm a whole cabinet. How much evidence is there to hear either? We all saw what he said, and then all the people came over and smashed the windows. Just vote. Just get to the Senate and vote.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Another good question. Do you think the double loss in Georgia made Trump and the Trump people angrier? Would the attack on the Capitol have happened if Perdue and Loeffler had won? I think that neither Trump nor Trump's fans really cared that much about the Senate election, and they showed that by not showing up for the Senate election, which is why Perdue and Loeffler didn't win. That's my opinion.
And he never wanted Loeffler too, right? He was not. He had always wanted Doug Collins to come out of that Republican primary anyway, right? So Loeffler was never his person. So yeah, I don't think he had any particular affinity for them. I mean, why did it would Trump doesn't have any coherent politics or beliefs other than helping himself. He is his biggest priority.
Yeah, I think it probably made him feel more powerful when they lost because he had spent weeks telling people that the election was rigged. I read somewhere else a Republican strategist was saying that when other Republicans win, it makes Trump look like he's the only Republican who can't win. So Trump actually doesn't want other Republicans to win. He is far more committed to his own ego than to, the ideological affinity he shares with the Republicans who will take office after him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, no other considerations aside, I don't think he gives a shit about Kelly Loeffler or David Perdue winning at all. I think this was an extension of the same kind of deal with the devil that's governed everything else between him and other elected Republicans, where he gives them policy that they want or political support that they want, and then they don't, go after his character or all of the dirty stuff that he does personally. And they keep their distance from that. And this one, I think, was he would support Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, and they wouldn't, say that he lost the election for a while at least. So I think it was just more of that kind of transactionalism. And then, of course, they lose. And he's just saying, well, now you really have to make me president because I'm the only check on this runaway democratic system. So, no, I don't think so. I certainly don't think any of those people who are breaking stuff, I don't know if they care about politics beyond Trump.
Right. They also showed up. I mean, they were already in D.C. The Trump people, that were there on the ground. I mean, they were already there. You know what I mean? So presumably they didn't come. They came to fuck stuff up, not to not to march and say we shall overcome. So yeah, I don't.
And they were planning it for weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So speaking of Georgia, I was quite surprised at the outcome, and particularly surprised by the margin. I think right now, with about 99% of the vote counted, more than that, I think, John Ossoff is up by more than 40,000 votes. Warnock is up by about 80,000 votes. I feel like even that margin obscures the true feat that Democrats achieved with this election, because in the general election, both of those candidates, and with Warnock, there were several Democrats and several Republicans. So when I'm talking about that one, I'm talking about people who voted for all the Democratic candidates, but they underperformed Biden by a pretty wide margin. And here they overperformed what Biden did by just as much. So it was really, a tremendous accomplishment for Democrats, and a real big fuck up for Republicans that they weren't able to get people to turn out, especially in Georgia, where historically in runoffs, the people who show up for runoffs are Republicans. They're older, they're whiter, they're more conservative. And it was the opposite in this election.
Yeah, there's no reason for Georgia to lose an election like that. If you think like all 13 statewide elected offices in Georgia held by Republicans, they hold 60% of both chambers of the state house. They haven't had, a Republican has been governor there for the last decade. I guess Roy Barnes gave way to Nathan Deal, if I have it. So yeah, I think actually Democrats haven't had a governor there since like 2000, right? So so it's just, it's kind of mind-boggling. Nobody as optimistic as people were about Raphael Warnock's chances. I don't think anybody thought that Ossoff would be Purdue. You know what I mean? Like Purdue is he got a family name there. His cousin has been governor there. There's no reason for him to lose that state, and for that to have happened, I guess I'm still like yesterday was bad for a lot of reasons, but it also just sort of obscured the amount of lead work and footwork that went into getting Democrats into a position where they could be competitive, not just win, but to be competitive in the way that they were. I mentioned that I lived in Georgia. I'll just say why. So I moved there in 2010, and it was, this is right after the midterms. Things are really bad for Democrats all over the country. You know what I mean? And the Republicans have just won the governorship. They've taken the supermajority in the state house. And then the Democrats had defections within their own ranks. They had two high-profile Black Democrats become Republicans right after that term. So this is 2010. This is the start of the last decade. And to get here in the span of 10 years is just it's absurd. It's somebody who's from Texas. I'm just like, how did they do that?
Yeah, I could see intellectually how this result could happen, and I can look at polls, and I even knew that the Georgia polls are more accurate than other states, but I didn't for a second actually allow myself to believe that this would happen. It just seemed a little too quick. I figured Biden, broad strokes, Biden takes a state, there's going to be huge backlash amongst Republicans. They're not going to lose both of their Senate seats to Democrats the first year that this trending blue actually materializes. So it's pretty incredible. And it did seem just I can't believe all the pieces came together. You got overwhelming Black turnout. You kept a lot of the kind of anti-Trump white suburbanites who voted for Biden, but maybe weren't so sure about down ballot races. There was a little bit of receding in that in Cobb County. And then in North Georgia, that's where relative to Democratic turnout, that's where it was really low in a lot of counties. And so, I joked on Twitter the night of the election, remember that fantasy? It felt like a fantasy to me when we were all talking about it. Like, could Trump like actually saying the election was rigged turn out like backlash and keep Republicans from turning out? Like, that seemed like one of those things that like liberals tell each other is possible, but then no, Republicans just all turn out and they vote and they win. But like, did that happen? I mean, there's like 20 different things that can explain it, but it does seem like to an extent that happened.
I mean, the week before the election, I was writing a piece about all the different advocacy groups who were targeting specific demographics to get them to come out in Georgia. So Mi Gente contacted every single Latino voter in Georgia between the general election and the runoff. There were groups doing outreach to Asian Americans in 11 different languages. Joel, I know you interviewed Nsé Ufot of the New Georgia Project, that they've been doing incredible work, especially with Black voters. And I wrote in my piece, like, oh, and there's this liberal fantasy that Trump telling everyone it's rigged will depress Republican turnout. And my editor said to me, does anyone actually think that will happen? Like, is it even fair to call that a liberal fantasy? Or is it just a narrative that media is putting forth to have something to talk about it? And I was like, yeah, you're right. I actually don't know if anyone even believes that will happen. And then it happened. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what happened. And it's, something that campaigns talk about all the time. And it's like a pretty obvious notion that if you don't think your vote is going to count, you don't turn out for elections. And I mean, whether people didn't show up because Trump just wasn't on the ballot, so they weren't motivated to show up, or whether they didn't show up because they thought it's rigged, or whether they didn't show up because they wanted to send a message to the establishment Republican Party, I don't know. But I do know that on the Democratic side, a lot of the people I talked to were saying that the fact that Biden won and the fact that it was so close made people really feel like their vote counted. And that Democrats were, or left-leaning people in general, even if they weren't registered Democrats, felt like, oh shit, this is possible, and they need me to do it. And that's what got them to turn out.
And what's also interesting about all of that, like there are a lot of factors here, but one thing that like just seems really elementary to me is that Trump is actually a bad candidate. Like, there's no evidence that like he's some sort of a political savant or there's some phenomenon. You know what I mean? Like he's a bad candidate. He's bad at campaigning. He's a real tough person to like. He does have hardcore supporters, obviously, right? But like that doesn't mean that that's an enduring base for him. That those people are going to repeatedly show up over and over again. While he's like delegitimizing the electoral process, also while things are as bad domestically as any of us can remember in the course of our lifetimes, unless you happen to be like, a baby boomer or something, you know what I mean? But like, if you're younger than a baby boomer, this is like the worst it's ever been in this country. So like maybe all of that stuff sort of played a role in him, and not only him losing, but the people that supported him, just being like, why would I want to do this again? You know what I mean? Like, why, what am I actually voting for? But
I think one real problem for the GOP that this race showed, I mean, one of the reasons they were so happy after November was he really did he brought out a lot of turnout too, but he brought out tons of new, mostly rural, quote unquote, white working class voters. So they got the turnout to really help keep a lot of House and Senate candidates afloat, especially as they got a little bit of split ticket voting from voters who might be voting for Biden, but then, were maybe looking for a check down ballot or something. But then when you take Trump away, then what is the Republican Party left with? They don't have that surge of Trump voters. And then a lot of their previous base, which is white suburbanites, are gone. I mean, not entirely, but in large part, they've defected to the Democrats. So they have to figure out, like, if they stick with Trumpism to kind of, keep those Trump voters around and all the, as we've seen yesterday at the Capitol, all the collateral damage that brings, or do they try to go back to a more traditional, upper middle class white business party and try to win back some of those voters.
Well, I mean, what did Loeffler and Perdue campaign on? I mean, they campaigned against Warnock and Ossoff, but like they did, like that was all, you know, a long running narrative about like what are they actually campaigning on?
And you know, Trump,
right, right.
It was beating back Marxism and socialism and, you know, the New World Order, and it was aligning themselves with Trump, who wasn't even doing anything to help them.
Right.
I mean, did you guys watch that the Loeffler Ossoff debate? It was like a month ago. I only watched it because it was my job to watch it. But
the Loeffler Warnock debate. I watched the John Ossoff debate, which was him just at a podium by himself.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. But it you know, I mean, that was another factor here. Was just how awful Perdue and Warnock are. I mean, Perdue, he's been a senator. He's an incumbent. He has a family name. He kind of just looks like, you know, the stereotypical senator, but yeah, he's just like a rich guy, and they had all these insider trading scandals and everything. And he was capable of putting his foot in his mouth. And then Loeffler, sorry, what's that?
No, neither one of them have any charisma. I think, you know, Perdue has like, there's nothing to that dude.
No, and Kelly Loeffler is, I mean, really just one of the worst candidates I've ever seen in my life. And I watched that debate, and it was very much as her like memorizing hit lines against Warnock, which she couldn't even like look him in the eye to say, you know, and just delivering them flatly and having no idea that this billionaire who lives in a named estate, you know, with Gates, like actually like, you know, cares about the, you know, the real folks out on the farm or something like that. But I think that's kind of like, that's, if you look at Loeffler's trajectory. So Brian Kemp picks her to fill that vacated seat because he thought she might be able to help with some of the suburban female attrition they've been having in the Republican Party. And then when they're both up for full terms in 2022, that would actually help him because, you know, they might be able to win back some suburban women, which, you know, it's obviously a very shallow idea to begin with. But then Doug Collins gets into that Senate race, that jungle primary in Georgia. So then Loeffler has to kind of take a hard right turn. And so you have this like candidate who may not even have been very good at that first job that Kemp picked her for, but now is having to be something diametrically opposed to what she was picked for in the first reason. And you just get this, I mean, like really short-circuiting candidate. Well, and also she'd never been a politician before, so she has, you know, it's pretty hard stuff.
One of the hooks is that she was the owner of the Atlanta Dream, and then, like, as it turned out, the Atlanta Dream hates her. You know what I mean?
Well, no, because she was like actively racist against him to make a campaign point. She was like, didn't she make a point of like telling her team not to wear like BLM shirts or something like that? Like she was using them as a prop for her Republican primary. Which, you know, did not go over very well.
I mean, this is one of the most heartwarming narratives of this entire campaign season for me. Somebody even did, like some academics did a research project. That's absolutely not what you call it when academics do something. They did a study on Raphael Warnock, his name recognition, how he was doing in the polls, and they found that the Dream, their decision to put Vote Warnock on their shirts and to talk about Raphael Warnock, and they made the specific decision not to center Kelly Loeffler at all in any of their narrative because in their mind, she's not the one that mattered. They actually helped him in the race, like materially. He started getting more donations. People started recognizing his name more. And I mean, this obviously comes on the heels of so much incredible political organizing within the WNBA and other sports leagues. And just to see them succeed, like, I mean, I'm glad Warnock is going to be a senator and everything, but to see the WNBA team succeed in their campaign just made me so happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I read what you read, Christina, maybe, I don't know, but something that Warnock was polling at about like 9% in August. You know, in that primary, and then like as soon as the WNBA pivoted to him in his campaign, I mean, obviously it took off, which is sort of shocking. I mean, Reverend Warnock has, you know, he was John Lewis's pastor. He's right there in the seat of power of Black Atlanta. You know what I mean? Like, you would think that just on that alone, that would have been enough to catapult him. But obviously, you know, things are what they are in Georgia. And so that the WNBA, and particularly Kelly Loeffler's team, were able to elevate his campaign is just like, yeah, I mean, it speaks to how powerful they are, but also how terrible of a candidate that Kelly Loeffler is as well.
Yeah. And I think their decision to give people something to vote for and not just against was a smart one too.
Yeah. $2,000, man. People get that stimmy, you know?
I mean, that's like, that's another big reason, I think, too. Like that in the last week, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I know it's probably, I don't know. We'll see if they deliver on that now.
Speaking of which, we have a couple more minutes left. So I'd love to hear from you two, what your expectations are, your fears, your hopes and dreams for the last couple weeks of Trump's presidency.
Jim, you want to go?
Sure. My fears, my hopes and dreams for the last 2 weeks. I would like to see him resign. I would say that's maybe like a dream. And my hope is that, I mean, just that we don't have another incident. I mean, really. And that's more of a hope. That's not an expectation at all. That's just like, that's a prayer pretty much. Like, I hope we can just get through these last few days, because what you've seen, like, as we go through each checkpoint in the Electoral College process and it doesn't work out for him, his mind doesn't change that, like, no, I'm not leaving the White House, but his options run out. So he launches into more and more desperate and dangerous ideas. So maybe I don't know who got to him, his lawyers maybe told him, you have to put out a statement, you know, limit your legal exposure here and say that you're looking forward to the transition now. But we know that's not going to be his tone, actually, for the next 13 days. So I do hope that maybe if all this stuff in Congress has chastened him, the threat of impeachment or the 25th Amendment, or some of his allies, it seems like, not central ones, but some are really distancing themselves. Maybe it's gotten to him a little bit. I hope that can just keep up. And then when that's all done, selfishly, I'm just looking forward to, like, not working 14-hour days anymore.
Do you think being put in a situation where they had to shelter in place, evacuate, put on those ridiculous, gas protection helmets, shook any Republicans to the point where they took Trump and his threats seriously for the first time?
Yeah, there were some who were shook, I mean, in the moment, and that's going to wane a little bit as time passes, and then the politics of their voters back home yelling at them will reassert themselves. But you saw in the first Senate vote last night, like half of the Senate Republicans who were going to object dropped it, because I think, including Kelly Loeffler, who was like, "Why am I objecting to this in the first? I lost my election. I don't need to do this anymore." So.
Right. Yeah.
Joel, what are you expecting to see?
Yeah, so my dream is that they actually impeach him, because I think it's important to make a statement. I think that if they don't censure him in some sort of way, that it just opens the door for this to happen in the future. You know what I mean? That, like, somebody smarter, somebody with a more coherent political philosophy, somebody that's more willing to harness, that anger, that white political anger, that they might be more willing to do it. And if they see that there's some consequences to that maybe that would put some sort of restraint on him. Or if he doesn't get impeached, I'd like to see him get arrested. You know what I mean? Something like that for stoking that. But I don't think that's going to happen. And that leads me to my fear, which is that yesterday, to me, and actually my wife was laughing at me about this, but I think that yesterday was sort of a test run.
Yeah.
for people that they saw, oh, well, there might not be that many consequences of this, and we can go there, we can live out our stupid macho, army fantasy or whatever, and nothing will happen. We got there, we shockingly were able to bust up into the Capitol. Very few people got arrested, somebody did get, unfortunately, shot, but they're like, anybody can just sort of write that off as like the cost of doing business, right? So I think that a lot of people are probably heartened by that, and that I'm not on Parler, I'm not on any some sort of Reddit or whatever, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that saw that and were inspired by it yesterday, and that this political violence might be with us for a while, and we just don't know what shape it'll take. I mean, people are leaving bombs on the grounds of the Capitol. We saw, it seems like forever ago, but on Christmas, somebody blew up half of downtown Nashville. So I'm just worried that people are gearing up for that. I think my fear is, that's my fear, that, that's in our future. But maybe, Christina, are you more positive than me? I'm fundamentally a cynical person, so I don't know.
Unfortunately not. The thing that I'd like to see most in weeks to come, and it might have to wait until Joe Biden is president, is just a whole slew of prosecutions of everybody who was involved in that Capitol siege. And I was downtown for a couple different Black Lives Matter protests this summer. I was reporting at one in front of the White House where you saw, it was like a homecoming party for every law enforcement agency that operates in DC. You had Secret Service, Park Police, Capitol Police, you had the MPD, all standing shoulder to shoulder. There were a couple hundred of them, at least, just in front of the White House. There were armored vehicles in front of the Pret-a-Manger near our office. Every intersection was blocked. The weekend after that, I was walking down Pennsylvania Avenue at this march, which was literally like old people pushing strollers, like people were barely even shouting. It was like, it felt like a parade. People were handing out snacks. There were 40 law enforcement officers, I counted them, in front of the Trump freaking hotel. And Congress wasn't even in there, and then you go to the Capitol, and the Capitol Police, there's a couple guards sort of like half-heartedly standing behind a barrier, and a dozen people get arrested. So the thing that I fear is that a lot of these law enforcement agencies are so enthralled to Trump and to, the like white supremacist ideology at large, that it will be impossible to ever get them to take seriously and mount a serious defense against white supremacist insurrections at any government building anywhere in the country. So that's my fear. And, just living in DC, there's always like a little fear in the back of my mind that any random place I go into could be the site of, the next attack by somebody who drove a couple miles to, get their hands dirty in a city that everyone says is like too liberal for its own good, or
you wrote about that just today, right? That's a theme of a piece you just published today, right?
Yeah, thanks for following along.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not having statehood means that Trump is in charge of the DC National Guard for another couple weeks. But as far as my dreams go, let's end this on a positive note. Besides the prosecutions,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that there will be some ambitious policy proposals that the Biden and the new Democratic Congress and Senate can pass. I'm hoping that a lot of Republicans are feeling chastened right now, and we'll see how it plays out. That'll be the topic of our next Slate Live discussion.
Christina, that's not fair. I didn't know that we got to like dream bigger than that. I would have said, I hope we can end the pandemic. I hope we can all get vaccines in the next month or something now. But
my dream is just I'm just trying to get through the next 13 days. I didn't know we were out to like have dreams beyond that.
Yeah, right. I wasn't
ask.
right. Yeah.
Well, the next time we'll all be vaccinated, and we'll be doing this in person from some sort of safe room somewhere here in DC.
Hell yes.
Hope
Well,
so.
come out to California. Come out to California.
Yeah, that would be much better, actually.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's
All
great
right.
talking to you guys. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and
Pleasure.
watching.
Yeah. Thanks for asking
thanks,
questions.
everyone.
Thanks for doing it. It's fun. All right.